We just request not to point the feet. If you want, you can sit on a chair. It's okay. Thank you. So I'm not sure how many of you know the song Jaya Radha Madhava. Maybe not enough. So we'll skip that. My name is Dravida Dasa. I've been here since 1989. And I joined Hare Krishna in 1973. So I've been doing this for a while. And today we're going to speak a little bit. The theme is finding hope in a hopeless world. So I'll begin with a little prayer to my spiritual master. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 18th day of April at the Sunday Krishna Fest, we're speaking on the theme of finding hope in a hopeless world. And I'm going to read a few verses from the Shastra. And the first one is from the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Uh-oh. Little delay. We may have to close that door. Close the door. What can you do? Okay. So, in this chapter, Bhagavad Gita chapter 13, Krishna speaks about knowledge. One of the topics he talks about is knowledge. And one of the elements of knowledge is Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, Dukkha, Doshanudarshanam, which means to see the inevitable difficulties of birth, old age, disease, and death. So, in order to truly understand the import of this, one needs to have some understanding of the first lesson that Krishna gave way back in chapter 2, which is that the soul, or ourselves, is different from the body. If, generally speaking, I was certainly this way until I learned something about Krishna, Hare Krishna back in 1973. You identify with the body. If someone asks who you are, I would have said then I'm a 25-year-old American male, and here's my name, and here's where I live, and here's where I grew up, and like that. But the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita is that this is superficial. That actually, we ourselves are the consciousness within the body. And Krishna gives a very nice instruction at the beginning there, in text 13 of chapter 2. And he asks us to think about our life to this point, and how the implications. And he says, Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yovanang jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatra namuyati. That just as we've passed through various ages in this life, we can remember, how old is your youngest daughter here? 6, maybe 7? 7. Okay, sorry. So she was 5 once, she was 3, and so were we. I can remember, the first thing I can remember was riding a tricycle when I was 5. There's not much more going back that far. I think we can all pick up some of the high points going back. But we certainly were that age, and in that age we had a different body, we had a different mind. We certainly had everything different. But what was the same? Now we're the same person now at this age, whatever it may be. I'll just tell you my age, 73. So I'm the same person, but I can remember all those different bodies I went through, different ages. So I am not the body. I am the soul in the body. I am the consciousness, you see. And the real revolutionary idea is that we don't die, and we're never born. We're eternal. But each time we take a new body, we forget the previous one, and we have no idea of the future one. So I identify completely with this one. And it's not always a human body. We see all these cats and dogs and insects and plants and all these things. They're alive. Their consciousness may be much more rudimentary than ours. But certainly we can see dogs and cats. They have feelings, they have fear, they have hunger. And they're souls, called Atma. So when that cat body will die, they'll move up to a different body. Now, we as human beings, we have a special advantage because our consciousness is more advanced. Our brain is bigger, we can figure things out, we can see. So therefore we have responsibility. What we do now determines our future life. We can either go up or we can go down, or we can stay the same. And so the Bhagavad Gita is giving us information about how we can train our consciousness, train ourselves to get the best future body. The best body is one that's not material and that is spiritual, back in our original home. Prabhupada would use the phrase, back home, back to Godhead. It means that we were once there. This is the paradise, the kingdom of God. Now we're here in this world. And we have to face these things, old age, disease, and death. We had this pandemic come upon us. Who expected it? Nobody. But suddenly all over the world, we've lost over 550,000 people in this country. Who expected this? But this is what material life is all about. Things happen that disrupt our whole plans and our hopes, which is the theme tonight, and I'll get back to it. And eventually we leave this body, we know not where. So the idea, the reason why I titled this Finding Hope in a Hopeless World, is that when we simply identify and we work simply in relation to this present body we're in, all our plans are ultimately dashed. We may want to plan to have a nice life, prosperity, and this and that, and so many things. But the time factor ultimately takes it all away. Because whatever we achieve in this body, it's like suppose you one of the few people who can accumulate some wealth in this world. Most of us, I know I do, belong to the 99%, not the 1%. But suppose you belong to the 1%. And you're able to get, $1 million, $2 million, whatever it may be. So you think, oh, I'm going to one of the lucky ones. I made it. You have a nice house, security, all these different things. But how long will it last? Recently, I think it was David Rockefeller died. That name is very famous. He was one of the Rockefellers who were heirs to the oil fortune of his great-grandfather, whoever it was. He was over 100. And I'm sure he had the best medical, everything, to try to prolong that body as far as possible, but eventually it wore out. Now, what did he have? He may have had $1 billion, who knows? He had all kinds of things, a lot of influence. All gone. Because it's connected to the body. The body is buried. And he, as a soul, goes on. And according to his karma, I'm not going to even imagine what that is, he'll take another body. It may not be a human body. So all of the hopes and aspirations that you attach to this particular lifetime must eventually be dashed. And that's why our spiritual master would use this phrase, which is an English phrase, hope against hope. In other words, when I say hope in a hopeless world, it doesn't mean that people don't have hopes. We have all kinds of hopes. But it means that it's hopeless. And now I want to refer to another. First, let me read this one paragraph of the purport describing these inevitable problems that just make all of our plans in this world dash them to bits. And that is, again, as I mentioned, birth, old age, disease, and death. So Prabhupada describes, one should try to understand the distress of accepting birth, death, old age, and disease. There are descriptions in various Vedic literatures of birth. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the world of the unborn, the child's stay in the womb of the mother, its suffering, are all very graphically described. It should be thoroughly understood that birth is distressful. Because we forget how much distress we have suffered within the womb of the mother, we do not make any solution to the repetition of birth and death. Similarly, at the time of death, there are all kinds of sufferings, and they are also mentioned in the authoritative scriptures. These should be discussed. And as far as disease and old age are concerned, everyone gets practical experience. No one wants to be diseased, no one wants to become old, but there's no avoiding these. Unless we have a pessimistic view of this material life, considering the distresses of birth, death, old age, and disease, there's no impetus for our making advancement in spiritual life. And this is where I can bring in the other part of the title, which is finding hope. Finding hope in this hopeless world. There's really no hope on the material plane. We may have all kinds of plans and political parties and give our lives, but ultimately it all fails because we die, and ultimately this whole world dies. This whole, it's destroyed. Everything that material that comes into being is eventually destroyed. This building, for instance, it has a date when it was built, I don't know, sometime in the 40s, I think during the war, and it had different uses. I think it was a warehouse, maybe it was a movie theater at one point. And then in 78, it's been over 45 years, almost 43 years now. It's been a temple. It took a long time to do all of this decoration and make it into a temple. And eventually, who knows what will happen? The oceans may rise. That may likely happen. 20 feet, what's going to happen to this Pacific beach? Or just time itself will happen. And it'll all crumble into dust, just like this body, dust thou art, dust thou beest. And it'll come back into its, constituent parts. So, where is there any hope? The hope is in ending our sojourn through this cycle of birth, old age, and disease and death. So that hope comes from cultivating this knowledge of who we are, what our relationship, as a spirit soul, what is our relationship to the Supreme Spirit, and how we can reawaken that relationship. And so I want to speak a little bit first, one more verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is, a verse that our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, would quote. It's spoken by a great devotee who was only 5 years old, but he was completely enlightened. And he was speaking to his father, who was not a devotee, to say the least. Prahlad Maharaj and his father. And basically he says that those who are completely absorbed in material pursuits, they don't understand that the ultimate goal of life is to reawaken our relationship with God. Nate vidu svarta katim hi Vishnum. Vishnu is the name for God, which means all-pervading one, all-powerful one. And Krishna is the source of Vishnu, the original Vishnu. So, durashaya, this word asha means hope in Sanskrit. But the word durashaya means the hope that will never be fulfilled. You may have this hope, it is hope against hope. Bahir arta manina. They don't know that the true arta, or goal of their lives, is to understand God and their relationship with God, and to make every effort to return to God in the kingdom of God. Now, the wonderful thing about it is, even if you don't succeed in this lifetime, just the fact that you've visited this temple, and you've seen the murtis, you heard Hare Krishna, this is a tremendous first step, and it'll never be lost. It means that in your next life, even if you don't do anything else, you'll pick up where you left off. You'll come again to the temple, and you'll make more progress. Whereas anything material you may do, whether you're Rockefeller or a pauper in the street, is left behind. And what you have left is your karma, and that's going to take you to a certain destination. So Krishna consciousness is all auspicious. So he's saying that, and it's all a question of knowledge. And he says in this verse, Andaya tanda rupaniyamana, that it's the blind leading the blind. If your education and all your influences have nothing to do with this science and simply with the material side of things, then you're lost. You don't know really what the reality is. We're living in a dream world. This idea that we can be happy and secure in this world is a dream, because eventually time takes it all away. So there's a way of living in this world with family and everything, but the focus is spiritual advancement, Krishna consciousness. And that's what this movement is all about. So a couple of other things I wanted to mention here. This is one of my favorite verses in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Because after all, as living beings, not just human beings, but living beings in general, we want to increase our happiness and decrease our suffering. Even an animal will be that. If there's some pain or difficulty, they'll try to get away from it. You know, if there's something, some food that they want, or the opposite sex or something, they'll try to go for it, try to have it. Increase the happiness, decrease the pain. We're all doing that. But on the material plane, eventually, with our greatest effort, we can't do that. The unhappiness increases, and the happiness decreases. This is what happens in the material side, as I explained, due to just the passing of time. So Krishna has a verse here where he says, Yehi sangsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adyanta bantang konteya nateshu ramade buddha. Now the key word, one of the key words is Buddha. Buddha means one who's really intelligent, realizes this fact, that the pleasures that come from contact of the senses with their sense objects are the very sources of misery, and they have a beginning and an end. Real happiness, spiritual pleasure, has no end. Once you reawaken that in your life, it goes on eternally, ever increasing. Now that sounds like pie in the sky because we don't have any experience of it in this body. But that's what we're searching for. As spiritual beings, our nature is like that of God. We're part and parcel of the Supreme Spirit. And the Supreme Spirit is Anandamaya Bhyasat. This is from a great literature called the Vedanta Sutra, aphorisms about the ultimate knowledge. And this says that Supreme Spirit is Anandamaya, is full of Ananda, full of bliss, eternally. We are part and parcel of that. So our birthright is, if you will, is to also be always blissful. But we're not like that. When we're covered by the material energy, by these material bodies, there's so many difficulties. We have little high points where we enjoy, but that ends and then it goes up and down again. And eventually, as you get old like me, you know, you can't enjoy anything material anymore, but you can enjoy the spirit. This chanting of Hare Krishna never gets old. It's spiritual. And so we saw it with our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. I'm fortunate enough to be a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. He passed away 45 years ago now. 44 years ago. And even in his old age, he was still blissful, even though his body was, not well. You could still see that he was calm, peaceful, and he was enjoying the kirtan and the devotees, and he would see the deities and all these things, because he tapped into that reservoir of pleasure which we all have. We're looking outside. Bahir means outside. Bahir artaman, the mind is absorbed in external goals. When we can learn, we can be trained to tap into that reservoir of pleasure and be able to enjoy in any circumstance that relationship. And that's in these verses. So he's saying here that the pleasures that come from the contact of the senses with the sense objects are the sources of misery, and they have a beginning and an end. And therefore, O Arjun, he's speaking to Arjun, the student, the wise don't take their pleasure there. So where do they take pleasure? Previous verse. The liberated persons, enlightened persons, are not attracted by any material sense pleasure, but are always enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he is absorbed and concentrating on the Supreme. Okay. Do you want a chair? We can get a chair? Okay, I know it's not easy to sit like that. Yeah. I know, I've been doing this for years, as I can sit like this. So the idea is that we have that sukham akshayam, unbreakable happiness. And so there's a verse describing that unbreakable happiness. From ante yogino anante. Ananta means endless. The yogis, those who link up to the Supreme, can enjoy endless happiness. And therefore, the name of that Supreme, one of his names is Rama. You know, the Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama. Rama means the reservoir of unlimited happiness. Hare Krishna. Yeah, if you're... It's okay, yeah. So where can we have hope? The hope is the hope of becoming Krishna conscious. When we come in touch with the philosophy, as we find in Srila Prabhupada's wonderful books, we find every page is giving us encouragement to step onto this wonderful path of Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of loving devotion to the Supreme. And not only is it theoretical, there's so much philosophy behind it. I'm just giving a little taste. But there's a method. There's a system. The Bhagavad Gita takes us through what is called the yoga ladder. It starts with karma yoga. Karma yoga. Karma yoga is the yoga of action. Because this is where we're at. We're doing so many things. So what Krishna says in this chapter, he says, don't just do things for your own selfish pleasure, you see, with yourself as the center. Because that's going to accumulate karma that you'll eventually have to live out in a future life. The more that you can sacrifice, it's called yajna. The more that you can give your service, you can do service, or you can give a contribution or whatever it is, to the supreme cause, you see, of enlightenment for all, like Krishna consciousness. Then that you're freed from that karma. You start to become freed from the bondage of your previous activities. So this is the main point in the third chapter. Yagyartat kamanonyatya lokamyam karma bandhana. Krishna doesn't mince words. He says, whatever you do for sacrifice in this world is liberating. But whatever you do simply on the basis of ego, false ego, self-centered, that's binding. So if you want to become free from bondage, then make your life a life of sacrifice. You see, sacrifice for the higher cause, or the best cause is giving to Krishna. Then there's jnana yoga. Jnana means knowledge. Just like there's this word, have you heard of the Gnostics? Gnosticism. That word Gnostic comes from jnana. And this means that you're always living and always thinking about the difference between matter and spirit, and how I can act for my spiritual welfare. Now in the 7th chapter, Krishna says, after cultivating knowledge for sometimes many, many births, Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan mam papadyate. One surrenders to me, knowing that I, Vasudeva or Vishnu or Krishna, am everything through my energies and my expansions. So this is an advanced state we try to come to. And Srila Prabhupada gave us this Bhagavad Gita. Now he translated it from Sanskrit to English, and he took great pains to give us the transliteration of the Sanskrit so we could chant the sounds, because the sound itself is very potent. The sound is spiritual. And the meaning of the words and the translation, of course, and then his precious purports, or extrapolation, explanation of what each verse means. So then we get to dhyana yoga, the next yoga in the ladder. And dhyana means meditation. This is, many of you are familiar with this, is very famous. The yogi meditating, maybe at a remote place in the Himalayas. What is he doing? You know, he doesn't seem to be doing anything, but internally, the mind is focused on God in the heart. You know, it's a difficult process, because you have to go alone, you have to sit in a certain way, and you have to, be fearless in the middle of a forest. Prabhupada sometimes says they sit on deer skins. The deer has died, they take the skin, because deer skin, you may not know this, has a certain chemical within it that repels reptiles and things. They won't bother you. So if you've got to sit in the middle of a forest, you can imagine how scary that is. How can you meditate? Is a serpent coming? Something. If you're sitting on a deer skin. So even Arjuna, who's so exalted, he's a personal associate of Krishna, he says, I don't think I can do this. It's too difficult for me. He says trying to control the mind is like trying to control a raging wind. I like to tell how I used to live in Miami for 6-7 years back in the 80s, working on books. And when you live in Miami, you're always, especially a certain part of the year, you're very aware of the weather report. Is there a hurricane brewing down there in the Caribbean? And those hurricanes, they'll come, and when they hit landfall, you have to be out of the way. You have to sometimes, take refuge in land, board everything up. Very, very powerful winds. And as you may be aware, there's more hurricanes and stronger hurricanes lately because of climate change. So Arjuna said, trying to control this mind is like trying to control a hurricane. Not possible. So Krishna says, it's possible to practice, but Arjuna says, it's impossible for me. What happens if I fail? So Krishna encourages him, well, don't worry. If whatever progress you make, you'll take into your next life, But then at the end of that chapter, he encourages Arjuna like anything. Because Arjuna is an intimate friend of Krishna. And Krishna is ultimately the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he says, of all yogis, the yogi who is always thinking of me, says Krishna, is the best of all. The Bhakti yogi. And we begin on the next chapter, 7, with lessons in Bhakti Yoga. And that continues through the rest of the Gita. So, what is this Bhakti? Bhakti is devotion, is loving devotion. We're familiar with that. What makes life worth living? Loving relationships with others. Whether it's a mother for a child, child for the mother. We have friends. We have a wife. We have a husband, a girlfriend, boyfriend. Pets. We can have a very strong relation with pets. And even with things, that's a rasa also, I mean, I have a very strong relationship with my computer. I've been working on it for many, many years. That's why they call it a personal computer, right? But really, that's also called a rasa, or relationship. So, Bhakti Yoga teaches us how to reawaken our natural love for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, what does the name Krishna mean? It means all attractive. One who can really fully reciprocate our love and is truly worthy of our love. So, but we can't see him or hear him in our present state. We're too covered. And so, through our transcendental spiritual party called a sampradaya, there's many different ways in which Krishna reaches out so that we can see him and hear him and serve him. One is the way through this deity form. If somebody say, oh, it's just a marble statue, but he's not. You see? Marble is also part of Krishna's energies, right? The most important way is through sound, the holy name, you see? And by hearing this sound, especially when uttered by a pure devotee or a sincere devotee, then Krishna is reaching to you. And if you hear carefully, you'll be drawn to that. Especially if you chant and hear and chant and hear. So our meditation, we meditate, but not in this formal way. If you're around here at any time at 5:15 to 7:15 in the morning, you'll see devotees meditating in this room by chanting Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Radha Giridhar Hari Ki Jai, Shri Shri Gauranga Ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadraji Ki Jai. So these practices of yoga, they reawaken our natural love for Krishna. And that is where there is really hope. That is the hope for us. Because we're very encouraged. Right in the second chapter, Krishna says, Neha bhikkhamanashosti pratyavayo navidyate svapamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bayat. He says, in this path, Bhakti Yoga, there's no loss and there's no diminution. Anything material you gain, there's total loss and diminution when you leave this body. But whatever spiritual assets you have, you take with you, because they adhere to the spirit. The spirit doesn't die. The soul goes on to the next body and takes its spiritual assets. And what's the greatest fear? He says, even a little advancement protects you from the greatest, most fearful danger. Who knows what that danger is? Yamunapati. You're losing this precious human form of life. So many years, so many incarnations, we've come to the human form of life. And we shouldn't waste it. We should understand its great value, its unique value. Because of our intelligence, we can understand this knowledge and we can put it to practice. And we can perfect our lives. So that's the hope. And even if there's maybe another birth or two, whatever it may be, whatever progress you make is in your bank account. And you keep taking human forms of life. And you're born in a situation where you'll continue this practice of Bhakti Yoga. So this is the hope. In this hopeless world, it's not that there's not hope in this world, but it's all misplaced. It's the hope of a gambler. You know, we're all gambling that somehow we can navigate, but the house wins every time. The game is rigged. You know, we can't beat the house. Eventually, the body, we must leave the body, And if we have no assets in Krishna consciousness, then who knows where we're going. We may have to spend many, many years outside of a human body before we get a chance again. So there's a very nice, there's so many nice verses. This is one of Srila Prabhupada's favorites. But on this theme, Labdva sudurlabamidam bahusambhavande manushyam artadam anityam apiha dira. Tunam yateta napateda namityayavat niksheyasaya vishaya kalusarva taksyat. So this verse is spoken by Krishna in the 11th canto, I believe. And he says, having attained, it's difficult to attain human form. After many, many births, bahusambhavante manushyam. You can hear the word man in there, manushyam. It's artadam. Artadam means this form alone can give you the real goal of life. Arta means what is valuable. It often means money. But the real arta, swa-arta, is the goal of the soul. And only in this human form of life do we have the intelligence, we can understand the philosophy and discipline the mind and the body so that we can gain some advancement. But like all forms, anityam, it is not eternal. So one has to be dhira. This is a very important word. It means sober-minded. Consider the reality of all these things. Wake up from the dream. And if you are interested and you want to pursue this, then don't waste any time. Because Maya is so strong, the illusory energy, that you can easily fall into the dream again and forget all about it. So it's a turnam yateta. Strive without wasting any time. For what? Niksheyasa. Another very important word. Niksheyasa means the ultimate good. Not something that's just comes and goes. The flickering phantasmagoria of this material world, which all of it comes and goes. What doesn't come and go? The relationship with God, the bhakti, the devotion that you cultivate, that you're able to achieve. And so he said, because you should know that in all these other bodies we've inhabited, we've gone on for who knows how many thousands, we've all had all kinds of sense gratifications. Most of which we don't even want to think about in these lower animals. Good grief. Or even previous human lives, But we've had it. In other words, there's this phrase in another verse, punak punascharvadaja, chewing the chewed. We've already experienced it. Now let us strive for that happiness that doesn't decrease, that only increases. We don't have any experience, so it sounds like a pipe dream, but it's the reality. This is the dream that we're pursuing that will never be successful. So that's the hope in a hopeless world. It's not hopeless because Lord Chaitanya has come, and he's the incarnation who started this Hare Krishna, dancing, chanting. The best yoga process for this age. No restrictions. You don't have to go alone. At first, it doesn't matter who you are, what you did. There's so many instances where Lord Chaitanya, he delivered some of the most sinful people of his time, who were little criminals, different kinds. But because they saw him and they surrendered and they began chanting and they gave up their sinful ways, they were completely delivered and purified and saved from so many births of suffering. So we should take advantage of that. The first step, read a book. If you we have so many books. Our friends, the Bhagavad Gita is there. I'm working off this iPad, but we have Bhagavad Gitas and there's book table. And we have little books, just a couple of dollars. You can get introduced to the philosophy, and it all makes complete sense when you read it. And Srila Prabhupada speaks through the page with so much certainty. There's no doubt. Maybe like this, maybe like this. No, he's channeling, if you will, Krishna's words themselves. There's no doubt here. He himself has experienced, and he's coming in a long line of great realized giants, intellectual giants and spiritual giants. It's not a myth. But we have to be careful because so many people, so many cheaters will come and play on your curiosity and your need for spiritual guidance and cheat. But there's no cheating here. We're not selling this mantra. This is the most valuable mantra of all. It's called the Maha Mantra. And you can have it for free. Take it, We're not selling it. And chant it to your heart's content. That's what I started doing. I wasn't a Hare Krishna when I started chanting Hare Krishna. I picked it up from another group, so many yoga, New York, you can imagine, And I started chanting, this is my meditation mantra. I'm chanting, And then Krishna from within the heart, he arranged so many ways. I met somebody who invited me to the temple. And eventually I, of course, got one of the books and became attracted. And never looked back these 48 years. So many things have been saved from the crack craziness in the early 80s, and so many dangers, and so much madness, And here I'm chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. So I'll share one verse with you. I put it into a little poem. This is an instruction from Lord Rishabdev. He's an incarnation of Krishna. And he says, basically, don't waste this precious human life, dear friend, by working hard for hoggish happiness. Through Bhakti Yoga, worldly life transcend and learn to taste divine love's endless bliss. It's real. So this is the great hope in this world. Prabhupada has brought it, and it's all over the world, available here. We've had, so many restrictions for this COVID. Now we're starting to come out of it. This is our new format. We'll chant at first, and then we'll have regular class in the evening, and then still have takeout boxes of prasadam, but it's there. But this is another thing. We've gotten through this. The devotees here. I'm part of the group. I live a block away, and with our association and the regular program and the chanting and so forth, we haven't felt the oppression. The oppressive isolation and loneliness and things. It's a way of coping. With the vicissitudes and the difficulties of this world. So take this mantra and take this philosophy and take some prasadam for sure. And if you have any questions, we can entertain them now. We have a few more minutes. Yeah, we have. Yes, I'm sorry. This coming Wednesday, we have a special festival evening, isn't it? Yes. Yeah, same time. Lord Ramachandra, who's one of the most famous and beloved incarnations of Krishna, and he is famous for rescuing his wife, allying with the monkeys, warriors, and going to Lanka, the present Sri Lanka, Ceylon. So we have a program planned for Wednesday evening, beginning at 5:30 with kirtan. Then we'll have a talk. Our resident sannyasi, His Holiness Badrinarayan Swami, will speak. And so you're all invited if you can come at that time. Okay, any questions? Comments? We have a few more minutes. All right. I'm going to share a few more poems with you. So Krishna is all attractive. He's so attractive. And here is one of the verses written by our acharyas, our great leaders, spiritual leaders, about relishing the Hare Krishna mantra. The name Hare is actually a name for Radharani, Krishna's beloved consort, his internal pleasure potency. And Krishna means all attractive one, and Rama means, as I said, the reservoir unlimited ananda, or bliss. So he says, Radheti nama navasundara sidu mugdam, Krishneti nama madhurapatagara dugdam, Savakshanam sudaviraga himena ramyam, Kritvata daiva pibame rasane chadarte. An excellent fresh nectar drink with endless subtle tastes, such as the name of Radha, by whom all three worlds are graced. Condensed milk that is wonderfully delicious, thick and sweet, such as the name of Krishna, in whom all attractions meet. Now mix these drinks, O thirsty tongue, and add the fragrant, cooling spice of love, a prize the wise will try to buy at any price. And then at every moment drink this beverage most fine, and make my heart supremely blissful, peaceful, and divine. And this is the state of consciousness that was achieved by the author of this, who's Raghunath Das Goswami and others. He was born into a very, very wealthy family, but he gave it all up. What would be he would be a billionaire today. Gave it all up and became very, very renounced servant of Lord Chaitanya, who, as I mentioned, he began this Sankirtan movement 550 years ago or so. And finally, we have, what is that? So this is a meditation on Krishna. You know, he lives in this idyllic world in Goloka Vrindavan, very rural. He has cows, cowherd friends. So he's entering the forest. Every day he'd enter the forest and he's playing his flute. That's another thing that got me interested in Krishna. I happened to be a flute player back in the 60s. Anyway, that's another story. So it describes Kusamita Vanada Shishme Bringa Vijikula Gushtasa Raksarin Mahidram Modapota de Vagaya Chari Himga Sahapashubala Badashtakujavanam. Vrindavan's rivers, lakes, and hills ring out with charming hums and trills as flocks of birds and maddened bees rejoice among the flowering trees. To those idyllic woods and glens repairs Govinda with his friends, Sri Rama and the cowherd boys, to taste the most exquisite joys. And as they walk along the way, absorbed in herding and in play, Sri Krishna, beauty absolute, begins to play his mystic flute. With peacock plume upon his head and fragrant flower on each ear, he enters Braja's woods with tread sublime, a dancer without peer. His golden yellow raiment glows, his garland reaches to his knees, and from his lips the nectar flows, and fills his flute with melodies. As Krishna thus begins his day with friends who sing his glory sweet, he beautifies the forest way with fine impressions of his feet. Samadhi culminates in this: to always see the scene of bliss within oneself and outside too. May Krishna give this boon to you. And on that note, we'll end. Thank you for your attention. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Don't forget to pick up your prasadam and check out some of our book tables there. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Oh, I forgot to mention, in case you're interested, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 7:15 in the evening, we have Bhagavad Gita class right here. You're all welcome. Just masks, social distancing.